Welcome back to our CompTIA A Plus Core 2 exam class. This is your instructor, Ceolito Rodriguez. In this presentation, we will be covering lesson 19, using support and scripting tools. We will be covering these four objectives. Use remote access technologies, implement backup and recovery, explain data handling best practices, and identify the basics of scripting. In the first of these four objectives, topic 19A, we will discuss the use of remote access technologies. Remote access tools are software systems designed to allow a user to connect to and interact with a computer in another location as if they were physically present at that computer. These tools are particularly valuable for tasks such as remote administration, accessing files on a work computer from home, or providing technical support. The Windows Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP, is a proprietary protocol developed by Microsoft that allows you to remotely connect to another computer running Windows. It provides the remote user with a graphical interface to interact with the Windows environment of the host machine. So you have usually a host machine and a guest machine. The host machine is the machine that you are connecting to, and then the guest machine is the machine uh, that you're using to connect to the host machine. To use RDP, you need to enable remote desktop on the host computer. This is not enabled by default, and this is found in the system settings under the remote desktop. You also need to ensure the network settings permit remote connections and that the appropriate firewall rules are in place to allow RDP traffic. By default, when you enable RDP, the Windows firewall allows RDP, but there are cases in which if you are having trouble connecting, it could be that the firewall is blocking the connection. Once enabled, you can connect to the computer using the remote desktop connection client. So there is a remote connection client that you need to use to connect to the remote desktop server. Again, which is available on Windows and other platforms like macOS, Linux, and even mobile devices. So you could RDP into your server from your tablet and basically do work from either a phone or a tablet or any other client. When it comes to security considerations for the Windows RDP, RDP uses a strong encryption by default using either SSL, TLS, or RSA security. Users must authenticate using valid user credentials, which helps prevent unauthorized use. But again, as we all know, a username and passwords in many cases is not enough nowadays. It is important to remember that the default port for RDP is 3389. Exposing this port to the internet can attack, or rather attract, malicious attempts. So it's often recommended to change this default or use a VPN. Now, the network level authentication, or NLA, is an additional authentication method that can be enabled to provide a layer of security before establishing a full RDP session. And again, this is something that would have to be configured before it can be used. Now, the virtual network computing, or VNC, is another popular technology used for remote desktop access. Unlike RDP, VNC is platform independent and can be used across different operating systems, including Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. VNC operates by transmitting the keyboard and mouse inputs from one computer, which is the client, to another, the server, and relaying the graphical screen updates back to the client. To use VNC, both client and server software must be installed and configured. So this is not part of the Windows operating system. When it comes to security considerations on VNC, there are different flavors, but basic VNC does not encrypt the entire session, which is a weakness, which can expose sensitive data. It's recommended to use VNC over a VPN or to use a version of VNC that supports encryption. VNC also requires proper authentication to prevent unauthorized access. Use a strong passwords and consider integrating with more secure authentication methods if available. Now, when talking about Mac, Mac uses or has the screening sharing, which it's built in. It's a built-in a screen sharing feature which uses the Apple Remote Desktop or ARD protocol to allow remote access. So similar to the RDP in Windows. This feature can be enabled in the sharing preferences. Users can connect using another Mac's Finder or via the VNC client if VNC access is enabled on the Mac. When it comes to security considerations, connections can be secure with additional passwords, and by default, Apple uses encryption for these sessions. Like other remote desktop tools, ensuring that only required ports are open and that connections are made securely, preferably over a VPN, can mitigate risks. For any remote desktop tool, the best practices include ensuring software and operating systems are kept up to date, using strong passwords, enabling two-factor authentication where possible, and limited access through firewalls and other network security measures. Whether using RDP, VNC, or native macOS screen sharing, these precautions are vital for maintaining the security of both the local and remote systems involved in this connection. RDP server and security settings. When using RDP, it's crucial to be aware of security risks like malware that can capture login credentials from system processes. Limiting RDP access to fewer accounts is safer as it adheres to the principle of least privilege, reducing the risk of breaches. Now, exposing RDP to the internet can make you a target for attackers who can scan for open RDP ports to exploit weak passwords or other vulnerabilities. To protect against these risks, use strong passwords, enable network level authentication, NLA, that we discussed in the previous screen, the previous slide. Change the default RDP port. Use RDP gateways for secure access. This is a more advanced feature that company use for remote desktop. Restrict RDP connections through firewalls. Keep systems updated and implement two-factor authentication whenever possible, and also disable RDP when it is not needed to further reduce exposure to attacks. The Remote Desktop Protocol Restricted Admin Mode, or RDPRA, is a feature that enhances security when using remote desktop connection. When you connect to a server in restricted admin mode, your credentials are not sent to the remote server. Instead, you are authenticated locally on the client machine, and then a remote session is established without transmitting your credentials. This helps mitigate the risk of credential theft on the remote server because your actual credentials um, never traverse the network. And in order to connect, you have to use a command line, and it's a little bit more complex, but at this point, the important thing is just to understand what it means. So um, it's not the traditional connection. Now, when you connect this way, if the remote system is compromised, attackers won't have access to your credentials through memory dumps or similar attacks since they were never present on the remote system. This mode is particularly useful in reducing the attack surface for a type of attack called past the hash attacks, where attackers can capture account login hashes and use them to impersonate users. When it comes to open source RDP servers, these are alternatives to the Microsoft proprietary RDP server that provide similar functionality but are developed and maintained by the open source community. They can be useful for non-Windows environments or for those who prefer open source solutions. And there are many of them. There's a free RDP, which is a free implementation of the RDP protocol, which is really released under the Apache license. There is one called RDesktop, which is another open source client for Windows Terminal Server. There is Guacamole, which is an open source client's remote desktop gateway. There's XRDP, and there is a lot of this software there. If you do a simple Google search for open source RDP, you're gonna find many of them. Now, again, if you use Windows, the RDP protocol, it's more secure than most of those, and it's not necessary. But if you use any OS and Linux, then there are some alternatives out there that you could use. The RDP server and security settings, again, um, the security when you enable the RDP protocol can be compromised. You gotta be careful how you connect. Make sure you use strong passwords. Make sure you use a VPN if possible. Obviously, if you are within the company inside the network, RDP, it's commonly used to connect, let's say, from your client computer to the server to do server configuration. And there is a also you could connect to help somebody over the to a different office, a different location, and um, again in even over the internet. So but anyway, there are risks involved from malware that can grab hashes, as we said, from system processing, and there are risks from allowing too many accounts to connect. Now, by default, on a Windows client, only two people, actually on a Windows server, only two people can connect at the same time. On a Windows client, only one person can connect. There is a remote desktop assistant that we will talk a little bit later, which is similar but a different functionality. But in any case, just remember that RDP is a very convenient feature, but like anything else, um, it, it could pose a vulnerability in your environment. The Microsoft Remote Assistant is the part of the same family, uses the same protocol. It allows users to send invite to connect over RDP protected password. And then you can chat and request control features. So you could basically, the main difference between RDP and Remote Assistant is that you can interact with the user. So the other users see your screen and your mouse moving around, especially when you're helping someone. Remote desktop, when you connect to it, especially in Windows, it will log you off, and then you won't be able to see the other person doing anything. So we'll look at that in the demo. There is also a feature called Quick Assist, which it's better suited to connections over the internet. Now, it's important to note that the Microsoft Remote Assistant, or MSRA as it is known, is designed for use on local networks. The quick assist features and again could also be used for that. And as we have discussed before, there are also some other third-party tools that could be used. SSH, or Secure Shell, is a cryptographic network protocol for operating network services securely over an unsecure network. Its primary purpose is to allow users to log into another computer over a network, to execute commands in a remote machine, and to move files from one machine to another. It provides a secure channel over an unsecure network in a client-server architecture, connecting an SSH client application with an SSH server. And so some of the key features of SSH is secure remote access. SSH allows for secure remote login from one computer to another. It encrypts the session, reducing the risk of eavesdropping, connection hijacking, and other network level attacks. Command execution. Apart from interactive sessions, SSH allows remote execution of commands on a server or another user's computer. For secure file transfer, SSH is used by protocols such as SFTP, which is SSH File Transfer Protocol, or SCP, Secure Copy Protocol, to securely transfer files between computers. Another feature is port forwarding. SSH can tunnel information such as application ports and the X11 sessions, enabling secure use of network services that are not encrypted. Key-based authentication. SSH supports a more secure method of logging in using public key cryptography. A user generates a pair of cryptographic keys with the private key kept secret and the public key placed on the SSH server. For agent forwarding, for ease of use, SSH can forward keys from an SSH agent on the user's desktop over the connection to the server. Now, how does SSH work? First, um, you need to establish a connection. When an SSH client initiates a connection to an SSH server, they perform a version handshake to agree on which version of the SSH protocol to use. Then, after the version handshake, the client and the server negotiate the encryption algorithms based on available ciphers, and then exchange keys to create a secure encrypted channel. Then authentication happens. The user must be authenticated before a secure session is established. In other words, you need to enter your username and password on the server that you are or computer you're connecting to. This can be done using a password. You can use SSH keys or other mechanisms. Uh, then you have this session established. So once authenticated, a secure shell section begins, and then data transfer Um, During the session, it's encrypted according to the negotiated cipher. And then finally, in the closure phase, when the session is terminated, when you're done with whatever it is that you're doing, uh, whether normally or due to a network failure, the SSH protocol can ensure that the secure closure of the session. Now, some of the key benefits of SSH are one, encryption. SSH encrypts the data exchanged, which protects against eavesdropping and content manipulation. Authentication, it confirms the identity of the server and the user. User authentication can be password-based, public key-based, or use other methods. And integrity, it's another key benefit. SSH ensures that the data sent and received during the session has not been tampered with. SSH is widely used by system administrators for managing systems and applications remotely, allowing secure access over potentially insecure networks. It's a fundamental tool for secure systems management and file transfer on a variety of operating systems, including Linux, macOS, and Windows. Desktop management and remote monitoring tools. They provide some features. Well, first, visibility. Remote monitoring and management, or RMM as it's known. Desktop management and unified endpoint management, or UEM. Some common features are performance monitoring and log collection, security scanning, push deployment, and remote support. The Intel vPro and AMD Pro hardware support for out-of-band or OOB remote access as it is known. As we just mentioned, there are other remote access tools like screen sharing software. There's third-party remote desktop tools designed to work over the internet. Video conferencing software. Most include a basic screen share and client. Nowadays, one of the most popular video conference tool is Microsoft Teams, but there are other like Zoom, for example, is another popular one. File transfer software, easy sharing via Bluetooth. So you could share files over YouTube. You could use the Apple AirDrop, the Windows Nearby Sharing, and Android Nearby Share. And we talked about virtual private network or VPN, which connect the remote host to the local network over a secure tunnel, and it can be more secure than opening or port forward remote desktop or SSH ports. All right, so this is the end of this first section of this lesson 19. We talked about remote desktop tools. Specifically, we talked about the RDP that comes with Windows. We also talked about VNC and some third-party tools. We discussed RDP server and security settings. Specifically, we talked about the fact that you got to make sure that you use a strong authentication, a strong passwords, that the operating systems is up to date. We discussed a little bit about the Microsoft Remote Assistant, which allows you to interact with the user, especially for support. We discussed the SSH or the Secure Share Protocol, and we mentioned that this is used to connect to from one computer to another for the purpose of administrating the server or copying files and that kind of stuff. We talked a little bit about desktop management and remote monitoring tools, and we also discussed other remote access tools that are alternatives to the Microsoft tools that you could also use, but that normally are used with other operating systems. For this topic, you must complete the use of RDP and SSH to connect to Windows and Linux host over a network on your CompTIA assisted labs.